Chapter 3 of Part 2 of the Lives of the Three Misses Judsons, by Arabella M. Wilson. Is in the public domain. Chapter 3 Account of George Dana Boardman. We need offer no apology for turning aside from the immediate subject of our narrative, in order to introduce to our readers one who must henceforth share with our sympathy and our affection. We mean George Dana Boardman, the successor to Colman spoken of in the last chapter. He was the son of a Baptist clergyman in Livermore, Maine, and was born in 1801. Though feeble in body, he had an ardent thirst for knowledge, which often made him conceal illness for fear of being detained from school. At a suitable age he was sent to an academy in North Yarmouth, where he became distinguished for ardor in the pursuit of learning, and fine mental powers. It is related that he went through the Latin grammar with surprising rapidity, and then expected to be allowed to use the lexicon, but was told he must go through the grammar once or twice more. Disappointed, he returned to his seat, and in an hour or two was called up to recite, when he repeated verbatim 16 pages of the grammar. His preceptor inquired if he had got more. He answered yes, and on being asked how much, replied, "I can recite the whole book, sir, if you wish." He afterwards manifested equal power in mathematics. At 16 he engaged in school teaching in order to obtain means for a collegiate course, the great object of his ambition, and in this employment he manifested a knowledge of human nature, and of the influence of which to control it, truly wonderful. The most turbulent and disorderly schools became in his hands models of system and regularity. In 1819, when 18 years old, he entered Waterville College, Maine. He was at this time a youth of good principles, inflexible purpose, strong affections, and independent opinions, but had hitherto given no evidence of piety. But in this institution his thoughts were directed by a variety of circumstances to a consideration of the vast and important topics of evangelical religion. His room-mate was a very pious and most warm-hearted man. The officers of the college did all in their power to elevate his thoughts and affections. In short, every external influence with which a young man could be surrounded was calculated to lead his mind heavenward. Under the operation of these causes he was, by the Spirit of God, induced to concentrate himself, soul, body, and spirit, to religion. In 1820 he made a public profession of his belief and was baptized. From his letters and journals we find that he soon turned his thoughts to the subject of missions. In the winter of 1820, he says, "The thought occurred to me that I could take my Bible and travel through new settlements where the gospel was seldom or never heard, and without sustaining the name of a preacher, could visit from hut to hut and tell the story of Jesus' dying love. Then in imagination I could welcome fatigue, hunger, cold, solitude, sickness, and death, if I could only win a few cottages to my beloved Saviour." When the news of the death of Mr. Judson's fellow missionary, Colman, reached America, his soul was filled with a desire to supply the place of that beloved laborer in the Burman field. Still his chief aim was to leave the place of his labors entirely to the guidance of Providence. On graduating at college he accepted the office of tutor in it for 1 year, and so great was the promise of his future eminence that the good president predicted that he would, at a future day, preside over the institution. But his heart was fixed on other labor, and as soon as his engagement was completed, he hastened to offer his services to the Board of Foreign Missions, and was at once accepted as a missionary. The parting scene between Boardman and his religious friends in Waterville, who had assembled to bid him farewell, is said by one present on that occasion to have been exceedingly touching. The eye of Boardman was alone undimmed by a tear. In a tender and yet unfaltering tone he addressed a few words to his brethren. We all knelt down in prayer together for the last time. On arising, Boardman passed round the room and gave to each his hand for the last time. His countenance was serene, his mild blue eyes beamed with benignity, and though there was in his manner a tenderness which showed he had a heart to feel, yet there was no visible emotion till he came to his room-mate. As he took him by the hand, his whole frame became convulsed. His eyes filled, and the tears fell fast, as if the tender feelings of his spirit, till now imprisoned, had at this moment broken forth. "Farewell," he faltered, and then smiling through his tears, said as he left the room, "We shall meet again in heaven." He had expected immediately to leave America for Burmah, in the same ship which was to take Mrs. Judson back to that country, but the board decided to detain him some time in this country for further preparation. In June 1823 he entered on theological studies in the seminary at Andover, and employed all his leisure hours in reading those books in the library which treated of the manners, customs, and religions of heathen countries. In the spring of 1825 he was called to bid his country farewell. Natural affection was strong, but the call of duty was stronger still. In a letter he says, "If tenderness of feeling, if ardor of affection, if attachment to friends, to Christian society and Christian privileges, if apprehension of toil and danger in a missionary life, if an overwhelming sense of responsibility could detain me in America, I should never go to Burmah." And in his journal, "Welcome separations and farewells, welcome tears, welcome last sad embraces, welcome pangs and griefs. Only let me go where my Saviour calls, and goes himself. Welcome toils, disappointments, fatigues, and sorrows. Welcome an early grave." It is easy to imagine that the sympathy and affection between two souls constituted like Miss Hall's and Mr. Boardman's, both of whom were warmed by the same zeal for the cause of Christ and the welfare of the heathen, would be unusually strong. And indeed there is every evidence that from the time they became fully acquainted, the most tender attachment subsisted between them. "You know," she wrote long afterward to her mother, "how tenderly I love him." And to an intimate friend he said in a private conversation, "It was not the superiority of her personal charms, though these were by no means small, but it was her intrinsic excellency, heightened by her modest, unobtrusive spirit, that endeared her to my heart." Chapter 4